welcome to a new Getting to Know Japan webinar. Thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to our sponsor, the Japan Foundation New York, for funding this series and enabling us to put this on each week. Today, we are joined by Mr. Jason Perry, who will be presenting on the history of karate in Okinawa. Mr. Jason Perry is the president of the Okinawa Shorin-ryu Karate Kobudo Kinsakai, a nonprofit organization that teaches Okinawa karate through member dojos and provides experimental and classroom education on the historical and cultural context of the Okinawa karate. He has a bachelor's degree in Japanese from Brigham Young University and graduate degrees in international relations in East Asian security studies from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and Naval Postgraduate School, respectively. He has studied karate since childhood and is an 8th degree black belt in the Shorin-ryu tradition of Okinawa karate. An active duty Marine, he has worked extensively in Japan, Okinawa, and Washington, D.C. in positions related to U.S.-Japan security policy and military relations. Mr. Perry, it is a pleasure to have you with us here today. I'll let you take it from here.
Hey, thanks, Amani. I appreciate it. And all of that Japanese was a mouthful, and you handled it extremely well. You handled it with aplomb. I applaud you. That's very, very well done. Well, thank you for the kind introduction, and also just want to thank YCAPS for the invitation to do this. I've been a part of YCAPS on and off over the years, and really appreciate all that YCAPS does. I think it's an important program, and I know a lot of people benefit from it. So, and I'm looking through the names, and I see some that I recognize. It's good to see some old friends. A little intimidating because many of the names I'm seeing probably know more about this stuff than I do. So y'all can bear with me, maybe forgive me if I misspeak here at all. But it's great to be here. I'll jump right in. I'm going to spend about 30 minutes or so talking about what I came to talk about. But while I'm talking, I'd ask that you. I think we've got somebody monitoring the chat, and if you have questions and things you would like to talk about, that probably makes for a more interesting seminar webinar than me talking about what I want to talk about. And so anyway, please feel free to open it up, and let's talk freely. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen real quick. I did prepare some slides. Try not to get too bogged down here. But hang on a second. I think I am sharing this and share. Give me just a second here, y'all. And let's see here. And I am going to try to scroll through. There we go. Okay. So just real quick, in a nutshell, to give you an idea of who I am. Amani covered it very well. I've got a little bit of history with Japan, all the way from being a young, actually a missionary in Japan. Is the first time I started. I arrived in Japan in 1989, but after that I studied Japanese at Brigham Young University. And since I've been in the Marine Corps, had several opportunities to study at graduate level education, and also an opportunity to study in Japan within the Japanese military, and to work in the defense ministry for a brief period as well. I am a career Marine. I've been in the Marine Corps for 29 years now, and it's been great to me. I'm an infantry officer, but I'm also a foreign area officer, which means that people who have a little bit of training in a language and a culture and history of a particular country to help solidify the relationships between the United States military and the militaries and defense apparatus of those countries. So I've had the fortune of being involved with Japan for about probably 25 of those 29 years. My karate background is kind of in my own head a little murky. I don't really have a recollection of starting karate. I think I started sometime in the early 1970s. I was born in 1969, so to give you an idea, I am a Hachidan, eighth degree. When I say black belt, that sounds a little weird to me, but in Shorin Ryu, which is one tradition of Okinawan karate, and there are many. I have authored one book called An Old Man's Way, and I'm currently the president of a nonprofit organization called the Okinawa Shorin Ryu Karate Do Kobudo Kensan Kai. And we really focus on not only the physical aspects of karate do and kobudo, which is the art of using weaponry, traditional weaponry of Okinawa, but also in teaching the kind of the historical and cultural context from which that martial art emerges. You'll see in the picture there, that's a picture of me. I don't quite remember taking that picture, but that's me on the right with my father. And my father is very influential in my own personal history with karate. So today we are going to talk about the history of karate, and I'm going to focus on Okinawa karate, but obviously it's going to touch a lot of different things. So a lot of different countries, a lot of different cultures, and I hope you find it interesting. If you have questions, please share them early and often. So real quick, and I'm going to make some assumptions that some of you might be very well steeped in karate and know it very well. Others maybe this is more of an introduction. So I'm gonna err on the side of this being a bit of an introduction. However, I will assume a degree of at least understanding of kind of the regional history and international relations as it relates to Japan and its environs, its surroundings. So a couple myths. Maybe you've heard that Okinawa was started by some Okinawan peasants who had to learn to fight with their hands to defeat invading Japanese sword-wielding samurai. If you've heard that, that's great. I have too. It's not an uncommon story. It sounds really cool. Handed down from father to son over thousands and thousands of years. That's another one. There's certainly instances of father to son and family traditions, but by and large, I'm not sure that bears out in terms of history. A lot of times I see, and even within the karate community, people talk about karate as part of the Bushido, this code of the Bushi, the samurai warriors. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I think you could probably have a debate about where karate falls into this constellation of Bushido, this code of the Japanese warriors. The Karate Kid. I love the Karate Kid. Was a great movie. I really wasn't. I was about the youngest person in my own school up until Karate Kid came out, and once that happened in around the mid '80s, all of a sudden, people my age, and I was in high school at the time, I guess, and all of a sudden, people were coming out of the woodworks. But you hear things like "Look, I always look, I," and that seems a little bit strange to me, but everyone in Okinawa knows karate. That's not necessarily the case. And then of course that it comes from Kung Fu. So a few of the myths that we're going to talk about, just to kind of throw it out there right up front, there were weapons restrictions. Often those weapons restrictions were imposed by the Ryukyu government and subsequently by the Japanese Bakufu, the samurai government after Japan's invasion of Okinawa. But the karate was not really a response by peasants to invading samurai. In fact, many of the early practitioners of karate were part of a shizoku class. They were peichin and chikudun peichin and various aristocracy within the Okinawan society. Talking about how old it is. Karate, the word as we know it today, was adopted officially in 1936. And that doesn't seem too long ago. The word existed prior to that, obviously, but it was formally adopted in 36. Normally, teachers taught very few students, normally kind of in obscurity, kind of fairly hand-selected people, but it wasn't really a mainstream thing. Samurai warriors probably would have recognized karate, and I generally view the idea of Bushido as, a response to peace breaking out after the warring states of Japan, and these samurai who are now relegated to bureaucratic positions, who wanted to preserve their skills and their samurai spirit through different arts. But karate wouldn't have been among those. Karate would have been very foreign to the samurai warrior culture. There are a lot of different martial arts in Okinawa and a lot of different cultural arts in Okinawa, but among them, Okinawa has its own brand of sumo. There's the use of weapons. There's dancing. Okinawa is often referred to as the land of dance. And in some cases, there are martial aspects, thread woven into the dance. And then not only was Okinawa influenced by China, but we'll talk about just a brief geography lesson. But Okinawa sits right at the nexus of a lot of different cultures, and those cultures influenced Okinawa and the development of Okinawan karate. So let's get right into it. Geography matters. If you're looking at this map, I'll give you just a second to look at it, because what I've done is kind of turn the map upside down. And if you're in Japan, you're kind of down at this 5 o'clock of the map. And if you're looking kind of toward the south, and the big island here in the middle, and that's Taiwan. This is the Ryukyu archipelago that runs along. Okinawa sits about right in here. And here's the Philippines. Down through here, you've got Singapore and the Malacca Straits down here. Here's Vietnam. So just to remind you that, first of all, while it's a big ocean, in early history, of course, these routes were all connected by dots of land throughout that ocean, and Okinawa is a very important one of those, along for seafaring trade and commerce and diplomacy, and so these all exert influence on Okinawa. So let's set the stage a little bit. I'm going to try to focus a little bit on the Meiji era and beyond. But in order to do that, I need to, for about 30 seconds, talk about what gets us here. Okinawa has a very long history. It was, of course, there's a three kingdoms period from about the early 1300s into the mid 1400s, 15th century. Eventually, the Ryukyu kingdom emerges under the Shuri castle, the royal rulers in Shuri. And this Shuri castle, Chuzan, as it's called, has a tribute relationship with China, and there is a lot of exchange between China and Okinawa during that Ryukyu kingdom era, from the early 1400s. Prior to that, but as a Ryukyu kingdom, early 1400s until 1609, when the Japanese invade Okinawa. But then even after the Satsuma invasion of 1609, Okinawa kind of walks this balancing act between China and Japan, where it basically serves as kind of a backdoor entry for luxury goods coming out of China to enter Japan during the Sakoku Jidai, or the closed country period, where those things were a little more difficult to obtain because of Tokugawa Bakufu policies during that time. Now, at the end of this period, in about the mid 1800s, of course, we have the long period of peace, relative peace in Japan, and then we have, of course, the Western imperialist countries beginning to really expand into Asia. you can think back to that map I showed you. If you're in Japan looking south, you've got the UK and Portugal and Hong Kong and Macau, and China's struggling with a little bit of how to deal with that. The Philippines, just to the south, is of course a colony of Spain. Singapore, the UK, the Vietnam, Indochina area of the French, and then of course the Dutch and Indonesia. And so you have this pressure from the West coming up from the South, and so Japan responds to that by modernizing, and this process is the Meiji Restoration, and Okinawa kind of gets caught in the middle of this. In the middle of this restoration, there are many sayings that are embraced at the time. Son no joi is to revere the emperor and expel the barbarians. Fukoku Kyohei is a rich country, strong military. The idea of kokutai is the essence of Japan. What is it? What is the essence of the Japanese nationality? And so while Japan is embracing modernity in order to compete with this emerging these Western inroads, at the same time, it is struggling with how to preserve its own soul within this modernization. And one of the responses, of many, but one of the responses is to kind of embrace or begin to deal with how to preserve, how to codify, how to systematize its martial arts, because that's really where a lot of the spirit of this kokutai is. And so one of the organs that was created to do this is called the Dai Nippon Butokukai, which means the Greater Japanese Association of Martial Virtue, Society of Martial Virtue. And so about that 1800s, here's Okinawa that has come through this long period of history, and in 1879, for the first time, it becomes officially a part of Japan. And now Okinawa, a subset, is within this context of Greater Japan, is also struggling to preserve its own identity, and karate becomes part of that effort to preserve its own identity. Now you'll see in bullet 1 I wrote te and todi. Te is hand. Todi, the character to literally means China. In Japan, historically, the dynastic China was referred to by its dynasty name. And so Meikoku would have been the Ming dynasty. Ming, the character for Ming being pronounced Mei in Japanese. Tokoku would have been the word for the Japanese word for the Tang dynasty. And so this idea of Todi is Tokoku, Tang, hand, Tang, martial skills. And so it really, because of the influence of China during its formative years of the Ryukyu Kingdom, much of Okinawa's outlook is oriented to China, and its martial arts reflect that as well, at least in karate's case. So now here we are back in this era of the Meiji Restoration, where we are building a strong country. We are building what is the essence of Japan. We are embracing modernity, industrializing. We are adopting Western ideas. We're adopting Western clothing across Japan. But there's also this strong desire to preserve what makes Japan Japan, what makes Japan special here. And karate becomes a subset of this broader discussion. And so you have this rhetoric that begins to emerge within the martial arts that is meant to contribute to developing a virtuous society. And so you can see here, just as an example, historically known as jujutsu, and karate and todi jutsu, right, or which can also be pronounced karate jutsu, is really focused on the martial skills of fighting. It is oriented to the professional warrior. The idea that somebody other than a professional warrior would engage in these types of arts is a little foreign at the time. Now, through the magic of rhetoric and through the social pressures that are on Japan, and the not only the social pressures, but the social momentum as well, you have this argument within Japan, broader Japan, that also extends to Okinawa, which Okinawa now is preserving its own Okinawanness within this increasingly nationalist movement within Japan. Now, to do that, we have to create what is considered a virtuous society within Japan. And so much of these arts that are arts to wage war for interpersonal conflict get rearranged. The argument changes, that these arts become ways to refine the character, a way to help a person consolidate their mind, their body, and their spirit, so that they become these strong in spirit and strong in body Japanese people. So what you end up having is a number of martial arts that move from this idea of jujutsu or todi jutsu or iai jutsu or aiki jutsu, and they adopt a moral philosophy that underpins this physical activity. And so what you end up with is judo, aikido, kendo, and this do means path or way. In Chinese, it would be dao, the dao, the proper path. And so this begins to have a lot of attraction within Japanese society. Now, at the same time, you have several people within Okinawa. Some of them are educated in Japan. They speak Japanese. Keep in mind, many Okinawans did not speak Japanese. They spoke Uchi-Naguchi, which is the Okinawan indigenous language there. And so you have these formative fathers of Okinawan karate that see an opportunity here to join the movement within Japan to have martial arts introduced to the mainstream of Japanese society. And of course, to do that, the education system becomes a target, or at least not a target, but a vehicle for this. And so you have people like Anko Itosu. The purpose of karate is to make muscles and bones hard as rocks, use hands and legs as spears. If children were to begin training in todi, there's that word, which can also be pronounced karate, using the Japanese pronunciation of those characters, while in their elementary school, then they will be well suited for military service. Remember the words attributed to the Duke of Wellington after he defeated Napoleon. The Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton, the school grounds. You also have a gentleman named Gichin Funakoshi. He's Okinawan, but he's classically Japanese trained. He's an author. He also goes to Japan in 1922 and links up with a gentleman named Jigoro Kano, who is the founder and organizer of judo. And he performs a demonstration of Okinawa karate there. He says, one whose spirit and mental strength have been strengthened by sparring with a never say die attitude should find no challenge too great to handle. Messages like this, of course, are attractive to the Japanese society at the time, as is the messages that you find in judo and jujutsu or judo and aikido, and to make a proper person, physically capable, mentally capable, emotionally capable, strong-willed, and so this becomes attractive. And Japan begins to adopt and become attracted to this idea of karate. So as karate moves from Okinawa to Japan, you see on the left there, Kyan Chotoku sensei with a couple of students. These guys are just wearing simple trousers, no shirt. And then over on the right, you see, out of obscurity, this art being portrayed to the masses as a way to strengthen themselves. Now, we often talk about, what is it that makes karate acceptable as a Japanese art? Keep in mind, karate at the time used the word China hand. That would not have been an acceptable title. We needed to create something that was uniquely Japanese. Remember, kokutai is to do with the Japanese essence. And so we have to change karate a little bit to make it something that is palatable to the Japanese sensitivities. And so we come up with a ranking system. You can see over on the left there, I mean, just a couple guys in shorts punching and blocking and kicking each other. In the middle, that's my sensei's sensei. That's Chibana Choshin. Those have been, adopting a judo style uniform, and he's got a belt on there that I think that belt is red. You needed to have a way to compete. You needed to kind of categorize your techniques, and you needed a code of ethics. And so karate begins to adopt itself to modernity to be acceptable to a broader population within Japan. By, of course, 1941 and April of 1945, Okinawa finds itself in the middle of this great power competition again, and you have the Battle of Okinawa. Subsequent to that, of course, Okinawa rebuilds under the occupation forces. And with that come a whole generation of American military men and women who go to Okinawa, live there, befriend many Okinawan karate masters from before the war who survived the war. Many of them didn't. And you see this great interest in Okinawan karate. My father was one of those who went to Okinawa in the 1960s and came back to the United States and began to teach karate in small little dojos, schools around the country, mainly many around military bases. And so karate continues to adapt to the demand signal for karate. And you see the organization of schools and associations and federations and unions. There's government interest and economic interests. And then, of course, there's Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid. Today, you'll see karate all over the place. I mean, we have organized, there's a Karate Kaikan in Okinawa. If you live in Okinawa, go down to Tomigusku and take a look at it. 2 years ago, we had karate in the Olympics. There's a Karate no Hi, officially designated Okinawa Karate Day in Okinawa. And a lot of, there's even an app. If you want to download the app, Okinawan Karate Navi, and you can go and see there's this strong effort to preserve the cultural heritage that karate is for the people of Okinawa. Okay, I kind of flew through that because I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of time for discussion, and I'm happy to revisit any of those topics that you would like to go back and discuss in greater detail. But I will pause there with about 30 minutes left.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perry, for your time today. That was a really, really interesting presentation. Before we begin the Q&A session, I did want to acknowledge some members of the chat. We have a couple of people who have practiced karate. So we have a couple people who practiced Shotokan. We've had a couple people who
Shotokan, yeah. So if we're talking Shotokan, that's Kichin Funakoshi. That's right.
We have a couple people who, we have one person who was a part of the Shorenji Ryu Kenkokan. They are Nidan.
Shorenji Ryu.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for my
great.
someone
you're doing great.
Thank you. We have someone else who practiced this one's a little difficult, but Ishinryu karate.
Ishinryu, my dad, my teacher's first teacher was the founder of Ishinryu, Shimabukuro Tatsuo. That's right. Great.
And well, there was one more that I wanted to acknowledge.
We've got a Okinawa Kempo guy out there somewhere, I think.
Yes. We do have someone who I think is one of your students. We also have someone from who's practiced the Goju Ryu and Kobudo, who's from Panama. So yes.
Fantastic. Good.
quite a few people who practice karate around the world. I just wanted to let you know before we started. And we all, yes,
No, that's great.
oh yes, one more person, Okinawa Kempo. Yeah.
Yep. I think I know both of those fine gentlemen. And if I get something wrong, they're going to call me after this is over and correct me as soon as it's done. So
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So to begin the Q&A session, I want to start with Catherine Mazer. Asks, so what is the correct kanji for karate? And can you explain the etymology related to the actual physical practice and skills, please?
absolutely. Let me go back and share my screen, and we will drill down on one of the let me see, this is taking a minute. I hope I can back up here. It's not letting me back up there right now. You are sharing your screen. There we go. Okay, let's talk about the actual characters. Okay, on the left, this character, can you tell me if you can see my pointer? Can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Okay, this character here is pronounced to. If you've ever lived in Japan and you've gone to Family Mart and you've ordered the karaage, well, this is the character kara in karaage. It's also pronounced to, and it means China. More correctly, it means Tokoku, which is the Tang dynasty of China, of course. And so before 1936, when the more acceptable to Japanese sensitivities term of empty hand became adopted in Okinawa, the title of what karate should be called was debated, and there were many different people writing things for the first time about karate that and they were all using different words. And so if you use the word kushu, you could do that. You could use the word karate, you could use the word todi or tudi. You could use the word just ti, which means skill or martial art in the Okinawan language, ti, which means hand in Okinawa, in Japan. And so Kempo was another popular way of referring to karate. Ken just means fist, ho means way or law, the way of the fist, Kempo. And so these various terms were used. Now, if you are trying to create a unified front so that the Dainippon Butokukai, as an example, could see you as an acceptable martial art that could be introduced to, say, a public education system, then you kind of had to unify across your population so that you could present a single message. We still have those challenges today. And so during this debate, this karate or tudi, this kara character gets adopted in 1936 as let's keep the pronunciation, but let's find another character that might be more appropriate, that does not hearken or point to China, but that can be more uniquely or appropriately Japanese. Because remember, this is still a foreign art. This is Okinawa. It had only been a part of Japan since 1879. And so the word kara, which means empty or sky, is adopted. And so the term kara becomes the adopted spelling, the kanji here, te, hand, empty hand, way. And that becomes now the do here, of course, means that we have to have a moral underpinning. There has to be a character refining aspect to this art. It can't just be about punching and kicking and throwing and blocking and grabbing. It's got to be something that is refining to the spirit. Otherwise, it is not would not be accepted as a way to teach this character refining aspect. Does that answer your question?
I believe perhaps yes, but we will wait.
Okay.
Yes, she said yes. Yes, yes, yes.
All right. Great.
The
Good
second part,
question, though.
thank you so much, Mr. Perry. The second part of her question is there any relationship of karate to Tai Chi, gestures, breath, images, things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really that familiar with Tai Chi. What I will do is limit my conversation, my comments to karate. However, what I would offer is that traditionally Okinawa had a strong exchange, both trade exchange and diplomatic exchanges with China. China learning was very valued. Both Bun, Bu, Ryodo. Bun means the arts. Bu means the military ways. Ryodo. Ryo means both. Do means paths. So both the way of the warrior and the scholar. And so you can imagine that with communities of Chinese citizens, Chinese in Okinawa, mainly centered around the Kumemura area, just north of Naha, and then also communities of Okinawans in China facilitating this trade. That certainly the influence of the internal arts of China are adopted into Okinawa karate. One influential book is called the Bubishi, and it directly influences the development of karate. And so in karate, a lot of times you will see a specific focus on internal breathing, on relaxed tension within the body, correct body mechanics. Many of those same principles that you see in Chinese influenced or Chinese original arts.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Michaela Lescu. Some people refer to the Bubishi as the Bible of Karate Do. I was interested to know if it really was such a big inspiration for the martial arts.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it was certainly influential. There are many stories about the Bubishi being shared between visiting Chinese and Okinawans, or Okinawans that maybe went to Fuxu, the Fuzhou province in China, and maybe studied in the Shaolin temples or in Beijing. So it certainly had an influence on some of the founders. I would be hard pressed to say exactly how great of an influence it had, or how broad the influence was. In some cases, it might have been local influence that eventually became greater and greater. But what we do know certainly is that there are those in Okinawa who were aware of the Bubishi, were aware of both the destructive teachings within the Bubishi. Sorry, I thought I was on mute there for a minute. And then also aware of the healing aspects of the Bubishi and applied them. Keep in mind that many of the practitioners of karate would have been aristocracy, and so they would have Chinese teachings and Chinese learning would have been popular, whether it be poetry, whether it be healing arts, or whether it be martial arts, or other arts, music, and other cultural aspects of it. So I can imagine a pretty strong tie to the Bubishi. However, how widely influential it was, I couldn't say for sure.
Thank you. So Patricia Yarrow asked, what is Karate no Hi, Karate Day in Okinawa, or when is it?
Karate no Hi is October 25th. It might change each year, but it's in October. There's in October generally that's when they do their Uchinanchu Taikai, and the diaspora from all over the world return to Okinawa. The Okinawa diaspora come to Okinawa, and they and that, I think that's every 4 years or something like that. But every year in Okinawa, there are wonderful cultural celebrations all over Okinawa. Karate no Hi is one of those celebrations. And at that time, you can see wonderful demonstrations by some of the most talented and well-known Okinawan karate masters. Keep in mind, we're only about one generation separated still from some of those early founders of Okinawa karate. And so, my father trained under a gentleman, an Okinawan gentleman who has now passed away. But he met the founder of the Shorin-ryu movement, which is my tradition of karate. So that's only 2 generations separated. So you can see some very close connections between that pre-war karate to the karate that's practiced today during some of those demonstrations. Strongly encourage you to take advantage of that.
Sounds really interesting and fun. I hope everyone in Okinawa, or who has a chance to go to Okinawa in the next couple of weeks or next month, can participate. So the next question is from Jeff. So I know there are many different styles of karate, and from the audience, it shows there are karate ka all over the world. Is there any rough estimate on how many different branches of karate there are? Do they all share the same lineage to one original system, and were they individually developed?
Right. Yeah. Great question. Great question. So, generally in karate, you hear the terms something, something, ryu. Ryu literally means to flow. It's like a river flows. And so to answer your question, so this is interesting because judo, Jigoro Kano, who I talked about, was very influential in the development of karate. Had a very close relationship with Funakoshi Gichin, but he was Japanese and was able to consolidate a single organization that would govern judo. And that organization exists today. It's called the Kodokan. In Okinawa, you had 3 different flows, right? 3 different general streams of karate developed. One is called Nafadi, the other is called Tumaidi, the other is called Suidi. Nafadi is the Okinawan name for Naha, Naha Te, the Te, the hand, the martial arts of Naha. Then you have Tumaidi, which is Tomari Te. And if you live in Okinawa, there's Tomari Port. And so the Tomari area, which was really a place between the trade functions that happen within Okinawa into Naha, and Shuri, where the government seat sits, and kind of in between there, you have Tomari. And in that case, you have many of the Chinese overseers of this tribute system. And so you have yet a slightly different style of karate developed in Tomari. And then within Shuri, you have yet a different style of karate. Now, this is just my opinion, but each of these looks a little different. Fundamentally, they're not that different, but they do have a different appearance. You can see them and tell which ones they are and which one, what's different. But if you think about where the interactions occurred, in Naha, you have trade, and a lot of that trade goes to southern China. And so you have Okinawans in and out of Naha into southern China and from southern China. Within Shuri, you can think of exchange students going to Beijing, or emissaries coming to Okinawa. And so you have a different influence from a different part of China influencing the development of that art. And then in Tomari, you have kind of a mix of the two. Today, generally, you have Shurite and you have Nahate, and then you have Uechi Ryu, which is a little bit different than all of those. But there was a debate within Okinawa whether to try to consolidate the systems, whether to even have systems or not. There was an argument not to have systems at all. And so to answer your question, one, there are countless, innumerable organizations and associations associated with karate. many of those branch off from various teachers who at some point started their own organization, and then they had students, and one of their students started organizations. And so it's hard to pin down any single source. Now, you can go back in history to some far enough back to some very influential Okinawans where many of these systems flow from. But a single source, I would challenge anybody to identify a single source.
Thank you so much. I'm very curious. So from that, there are various origins or various different types of karate. I'm curious with regards to, like, let's say, people. So in the West, like, we know through like movies and you know, different martial artists that are from China. Bruce Lee comes to mind, even
Right.
like actors like Jackie Chan. And so I'm wondering, are there any people or figures from Okinawa particularly that are as famous, but perhaps maybe in the West we didn't get that much exposure to them, who perhaps were martial artists on film, or, you know, just really popular figures maybe within Okinawa?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is yes, absolutely. You have early karate masters like Takahara Peichin, Bushi Matsumura, Anko Itosu, Azato Anko. You have a small number of well-known karate masters, for lack of a better word, who within the known history of Okinawa karate, because I would argue that for all the ones we know, there are probably many who we don't know, or their particular tradition has kind of faded away, unfortunately. I talked a little bit about what Okinawa is doing to preserve that history. And within Okinawa, there's a strong movement to create memorials to these great masters. And so if you go to Tomari, as an example, you can find the memorial stones. These aren't graves, they're memorial stones to the various great masters, Motobu Choki, Matsumura Kosaku, Nakamura Shigeru, people who played an extremely important, Gichin Funakoshi as one, people who played an important role in spreading, not only preserving the martial art within Okinawa, but also who played an important role in spreading Okinawa karate in their own tradition to the world. It takes a little bit of digging, but not a lot. The information is out there, and so if for someone who's really interested in pursuing those, there are books and studies and things like that done, and certainly there's also, interestingly, the Okinawa Karate Information Center, which is in the Karate Kaikan. It's an organization. It is supported by both the Okinawa prefectural government. The prefectural government has a traditional karate promotion agency, and so there is a strong movement within Okinawa to make sure those famous founders of Okinawa karate, all who played their own part, are preserved within Okinawa.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Catherine Mazur. In the early karate, were Japanese or Okinawan women equally involved as practitioners, or when did women also begin to practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to the question. I think primarily, from what I understand, it's probably more of a post-war thing. Although there are stories of Okinawan women who were fierce and capable fighters. But really, once I think post-war, if I were to venture and maybe an educated guess, I'll call it that, I think the history would bear out that really in post-war, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were females in Japan, maybe in Okinawa, who trained prior to the war as well. But really in post-war, you have some real now well-known and high-ranking women who are who become popular within, or well-known, I shouldn't say popular, but well-known in Okinawa. But I'd say that that's still that's still an area where you're seeing growth in karate, where you have women now who are now at the head of their organization in Okinawa, and who have attained significant rank. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good growth opportunity there as well.
Thank you. The next question is from Aaron Payne. What is your favorite kata?
Aaron, next week we will do my favorite kata together many times, my friend. It's fun. There's my favorite kata to study. So kata is the formal movements of karate wherein are found the principles of martial technique, right? And so you might call it something that looks like a dance, but it's a prearranged set of movements, and within those motions, a deep study of those motions can teach us principles of body mechanics that make us strong and capable fighters. That's the theory of the case anyway. So Aaron, my favorite kata to study is Naihanchi Shodan. It's the first kata I ever learned, and I think there is a lifetime to study within Naihanchi Shodan. Probably my favorite kata to do, but as I get older, I like it to do it more because it's increasingly challenging as I get old and a little bit soft in the middle and out of shape. But Kusan Kudai might have to be next, just because I think it's, for our system, a little more athletic and challenging physically. So it keeps me on my toes. Good question. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you so much. So the next question comes from Pedro Bernardi. Can you speak to the transmission of Okinawan karate to the USA? How, when, and who?
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. My dad did. Chris Wilson, who's on the forum here, has a wonderful video series, and I had the good fortune of being able to sit down with my dad while he did a wonderful series. My father went to Okinawa for the first time in 1964, post-war, and he explains that prior to that he had heard of judo, but he never heard of karate until he got to boot camp in 1956. And so karate was kind of not as well known in the West. There's another gentleman who's actually on the forum now who wrote a book called The Western Generation. And when you look at that book, you see a whole host of Western martial artists who very early in their normally military careers, this would have been post World War II occupation, when remember Okinawa was administered by the United States up until 1972. It was reverted back to the administrative control of Japan in 1972. And so and the Okinawans are coming out of this post-war period with a how do you make a living now out of the ashes of this battle? And come to find out, there was an interest in karate. And so around the bases, these service members would get these little cards, and I think they'd pay $1 a month, and they could go off base and go to Shimabuku Tatsuo's dojo in Agina, outside of Camp Courtney or Camp Hague, or they could go and train with Kanye Uechi outside of Futenma, or they could go train with Nakazato Shugoro outside of what's now the Naha Air Base, which was then occupied by the U.S. forces. And these early service members loved to go to the dojo. They didn't have a whole lot to do. They loved to fight. And so that's what they did. They go to the dojo and fight. And these Okinawan masters realized that there's an interest in this. And we can actually, we could even maybe make a living doing this. And so subsequently, these service members, especially, Vietnam era, a lot of service members going through, and they came back to the United States and they opened their own dojos within that tradition. So Shorting Yu around a lot of the Air Force and Navy bases and the Marine Corps bases, a lot of Ishin Yu around the Marine Corps bases, and Okinawa Kempo out of the Central Marine Corps bases as well. And so subsequently, you have this growing population of interest in karate in foreign countries for the first time in history. And then you have Americans saying, hey, sensei, keep in mind now, all of a sudden we're becoming more and more interconnected. People can travel more easily between Japan and the United States. And so we start bringing these karate instructors out to the United States, and they organize branch dojos, branch schools in the United States, and kind of create this network of karate. And then of course, as time goes on, it only became more and more popular from there, to where now in South America and Europe and South Asia, there's just a tremendous Australia. Goodness, I mean, karate now touches every corner of the world, I think. So I think that maybe answers the question, but early post-war 1950s and 60s is really where the foundation of that transition happened. And then by the 1960s and into the 70s, I think is where you really start to see the growth happen pretty rapidly.
Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I guess the final question comes from Kevin Fenton. So for people who perhaps are interested in karate but have never practiced, how would a person go about finding a karate instructor or as a beginner?
Yeah, that's a great question. You go to every mall in America and there's a karate school. And a lot of times it's not karate, actually. And it depends on what you want to do. There's wonderful other arts out there, and sometimes they might have karate on the billboard, but they're actually teaching a Korean art or a Chinese art of some sort. But karate seems to be the broad banner, if you will. For me personally, karate is an important part of Okinawa, and it's important part of who I am. So I am a little more tied to the tradition of Okinawa and the Okinawan art, where karate emerges from, and less into the sporting aspect. So I think the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do I want to do the sport of karate, or do I want to do the art of karate? Or do I want to try to find a way to kind of do both? And that's possible too. The second is, what are you interested in? And to find a teacher who I think offers you the option, the way to really find your own path within karate. Karate can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and it can mean different things for different people at different times in their life. And so what I would say is, one, there's a tremendous network of people out there that once you start to talk to them, certainly feel free to contact me, and I'll put you in touch with somebody. In Okinawa, there's a wonderful network of people who, if you go and Google up the Karate Kaikan, they can put you in touch with people in Okinawa who train. And depending on what kind of karate you're looking for. But I would, kind of start with what are your goals, and what do you really want to get out of the practice of karate, and then go from there.
Thank you so much. So if people would like to talk with you about, further finding an instructor, what is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, what should I do? Should I put my I'm happy to put my email address in the chat. Can I do that?
Yes, that's perfectly.
Jason.perry at, and this is going to get a little long, shortingyukensankai.org. Hang on, let me make sure I got it right. Jason.perry at shortingyukensankai.org. Hi. Okay, I think it's in there. Feel free to shoot me an email, and I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. I think I'm pretty easy to talk to, and so feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perry, for your presentation today and for taking time out of your day to be with us. Thank you, everyone, for all of the amazing questions. I apologize that we weren't able to get to all of them today, but I also want to thank our program sponsor, the Japan Foundation New York, for always allowing us to put on these really interesting presentations each and every week. And lastly, I realize we've run out of time. I would like to present some upcoming events. But once again, thank you so much, Mr. Perry, for your time today.
Thank you, and thank you for everything y'all do at YCAPS. I really appreciate the opportunity.
One moment while I prepare the slides. One second. Okay, I apologize. I'm having some technical difficulties, but I will, I guess if it's okay, I'll just verbally mention the upcoming events. So we have a webinar later on this week called India and China Economic Ties. Which way is it heading? An impression from India. This is going to be on Friday, September 8th. It starts at 1900, so 7 o'clock to 2100, which is 9 p.m. Japan Standard Time. This is an online webinar, so more information about this will be in the chat. The next Community Conversations event is going to be on September 11th in Misawa. This is an in-person event. It's going to be on Japan's decision to defend Taiwan, opportunities and challenges. Once again, this is on Monday, September 11th. It starts at 17:30 with refreshments and 18:30 with the presentation. So if you are in the Misawa area and would like to come out for this event, again, this is in person in Misawa on September 11th. The next Getting to Know Japan webinar is going to be on Thursday, September 14th. It is on the Camp David Summit and the US, Japan, South Korea trilateral security relations. So if you are familiar with the Camp David Summit that took place a couple weeks ago, we will have a webinar touching on this topic. And this again will be on Thursday, September 14th. All of the information for all three events, both in person and online, will be in the chat. And last but not least, of course, we have our YCAPS YouTube channel. So if you would like to watch this presentation again, or presentations from April of this year until now, that will be present on our YCAPS YouTube channel. If you haven't already, please follow our YouTube channel, turn on your notifications, so each and every time we upload a new video, of the webinar, you will be able to be notified right away. And of course, if you have some comments and feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, wherever you're joining us from. We really appreciate it, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you so much, Mr. Perry. Thank you so much to our audience. See you next week. Bye.
Hey, thanks, Amani.